Did you ever ask yourself why you play games, and whether you should stop wasting your time with them? For more than 40% of the world population, games are a hobby, which means that gaming is an activity that doesn't go anywhere. We do not play to earn money or to contribute to society, we play to do the opposite. That is, to create a special time and space in which we enjoy something, just to enjoy it, and nothing else. For most of us, the activity of playing doesn't have any other goal but to entertain ourselves and enjoy something unrelated to our daily work. As such, playing is inherently useless. It doesn't contribute anything to society, and on top of that, it isolates us, makes us retreat into a room, looking at a screen for hours on end. Most of us experienced being scolded by our parents during our childhood over the fact that we spent too much time playing instead of doing something supposedly more meaningful, like socializing, learning to play an instrument, getting better grades, etc. Since the very beginning, games have always been perceived negatively, as a distraction from other serious activities which matter more. But what if that uselessness isn't a flaw, but the most valuable aspect of games? This video essay argues that the uselessness of video games, instead of being an issue, is a blessing in disguise. In truth, and paradoxically, the meaninglessness of games is precisely what makes them meaningful to us. Here's why. In her book The Human Condition, Hannah Arendt explains that all serious activities are called labor, and every activity which is not necessary either for the life of the individual or for the life process of society is subsumed under playfulness. With the rise of labor wages in the 19th century came a societal shift through which labor work was considered vital in order to earn a living, but also in order to pursue a career, a concept that also appeared in the 19th century. Everything unrelated to earning a living and pursuing a career was separated from society and public life, relegated to a more intimate, private space. In such a context, hobbies were mostly connected to private space and free time, and we ought to understand this literally. For Arendt, the opposition between work and play highlights a deeper opposition between necessity and freedom. In other words, we play to be free, to free ourselves from our obligations. We should think of gaming as a shelter, protected from the outside world. This shelter is important because it offers a reprieve from daily occupations and responsibilities. In there, we can stop worrying about work, family, and everything else connected to adult life. That shelter offers a breathing room in which nothing is at stake. We do not risk losing our job, our social relationships, our status, etc. when playing. By being separated from everything else, gaming embodies a unique time in our lives through which we pursue enjoyment just for the sake of it, and not for a higher goal or end. Importantly, playing has no end but itself. What I mean here is that we do not play to better ourselves as human beings, as contributors to a bigger entity that is society. Because of its isolated nature, gaming doesn't contain any higher purpose but itself. We shouldn't expect anything from gaming, except enjoyment. The moment people try to transform games into something else, that is, something more purposeful, more useful, then it becomes something entirely different. In recent years, many studies have come out about how games improve people's cognitive skills, reaction time, hand-eye coordination, or even reduce stress. What these studies end up doing, voluntarily or not, is frame games as a hobby which improves some of the human qualities society considers useful. Consequently, these studies negate the idea of gaming as a shelter, because they eliminate the separation between gaming and all the other activities. For these studies, we don't play just for the sake of it. Rather, we should justify our desire to play by recognizing how this activity helps us acquire new skills or sharpen them. Something similar happens when people learn to play an instrument. We often perceive it as a way to improve cognitive abilities instead of a separate activity that leads nowhere and will never achieve anything apart from the pleasure it brings us. Studying games' cognitive impacts leads to games being presented as a useful hobby that pairs up pleasure with utility. And when pleasure is chained to utility, it stops being pleasure in the full sense of the term, now reduced to a means toward a higher end. While gaming does have some benefits I'm not trying to dismiss here, its most essential quality is, in fact, to have none, because by being useless, it offers a time and space entirely different from everything else we do in this world. Consider how the Souls-like are perceived as games whose difficulty helps us overcome the odds and face obstacles better. That is most certainly true, and these aspects are useful on a day-to-day basis. But what's more important than that is the fact that games provide an infinite number of chances to fail, to try and experiment, which in the real world we don't have. The experimental aspect of video games is not nearly as present in our daily life, where experimenting can have dire consequences, at work or elsewhere. As a sheltered type of activity with low stakes, playing offers a space in which we can try anything we wish to, as we are no longer at risk of facing serious consequences. Let's use a concrete example. In Elden Ring, we can play in the most inefficient way possible if we desire to, like playing with bare fist only and trying to finish the game that way. This inefficient and carefree mindset, just for the sake of experimenting and having fun, cannot happen in the real world, because it would be detrimental and badly perceived by society. The greatest aspect behind playing is the fact that we can play poorly, on purpose or not, just to try, because playing implies toying with the rules of the game and not having to deal with any sort of consequences. As a result, we can bend or break rules to the point where things become silly and fun, for no other purpose but to be silly and fun. In doing so, we reclaim a form of childlike freedom that the structures of adult life often demand we abandon. So what then? Are games meant to help us breathe between work sessions? Do we play to reset, to quote-unquote recharge batteries, as we like to say? That way we can come back to work more efficiently, thanks to the pause games provided us. Such a perspective is detrimental to what games are and should remain. If we understand playing as an activity which allows us to rest in order to be more productive once we get back to work, then games are nothing more than a way to produce better. They are not separate from society and work. In fact, they are part and parcel of that society, in that they help us contribute more efficiently. Games thus become as useful as cogs in a productivist machine we all participate in. To put it differently, it amounts to saying that we understand playing like we understand holidays. They are useful because they help us refresh and come back to work with more energy and efficiency. But this isn't leisure, it's just maintenance. The most compelling aspect of games ought to stay away from productivity and usefulness. Otherwise, games serve a purpose, and playing is no longer about enjoyment or having a carefree attitude. Failing to see this risks changing our relationship to games, a relationship that's now transactional, since we view games as tools to help us produce. The mindset we should all be avoiding is the one where we choose to play specific games because of what they provide us with. Imagine a professional player who competes in FPS games for a living. That player, anytime they choose to enjoy games like The Witcher 3, Red Dead Redemption 2 or even Balatro, in which no reflexes are needed, that player will feel bad about it, because they could have chosen an action-driven game instead, in order to keep up with their skills. The same happens if, in order to stay focused when playing competitive games, the same player chooses to play relaxing games like Stardew Valley instead. In effect, the problem comes from the strategic mindset behind these decisions, which prevents the player from considering games as a pure joyful activity. The moment we strategize playing as a useful activity, it's no longer the same and it becomes a work, with its obligations and calculations, which automatically makes games less endearing. In his recent book entitled Psychopolitics, Byung-Chul Han describes our current society as a system which promotes self-exploitation. More precisely, Han explains that because of the freedom society gives us to achieve our dreams, we transform our hobbies into work. It's the equivalent of saying, you enjoy video games? What about making money from talking about them, or from playing them in front of others? If becoming an influencer or YouTuber is so enticing for many, it's because turning our passions into our daily job sounds appealing. However, we've known for a while now how dangerous this is. For Han, the freedom to join passion and work together ends up creating a system through which we exploit ourselves, always looking to do more because we feel compelled to achieve our dream of being paid to spend our days enjoying our hobbies and passions. But the moment that passion is an obligation, a necessity in order to earn money, then it's no longer a hobby, just another job. With time and thanks to the many testimonies from content creators, we now have a better understanding of the mental toll associated with combining work with passion. Such a statement doesn't necessarily mean that any job related to someone's hobby is bad and to be avoided. Rather, it's a call for boundaries, for preserving spaces in our lives where nothing is at stake. We simply need to treat video games as they are, so that we preserve them from becoming tools of production. The scholar Roger Caillois also pondered over professional players, more specifically sports players, wondering if they were still playing. For him, they are not players but workers. When they play, it's at some other game. This remark highlights how, in the current video game landscape, streamers and YouTubers may no longer be players the moment the act of playing becomes a labor, a work they have to do to earn a living. For them, video games become increasingly difficult to enjoy as a shelter, as an unproductive form of entertainment. The moment gaming is a productive means toward a money end, it loses its identity, leading to streamers and YouTubers feeling disillusioned about the profession and their passion, hence the increasing number of burnouts and depressions they're experiencing. What's more is that we see here how our current society, by merging work with hobbies, creates the conditions under which no activity is sheltered from public life, impeding us from freeing ourselves from the productivist machine under which we live. Freedom is thus not achieved by transforming our passions into labor. Rather, we feel free when, from time to time, we can afford not participating in society and embrace what true leisure is. That is, an occupation distanced from the demands of work and duties. Caillois' definition of play is helpful in thinking further about all this. For him, play is an occasion of pure waste. Waste of time, energy, ingenuity, skill, and often of money. Games are not just useless. In fact, they are worse than that for our society. They represent a moment of waste, in that we waste our energy and time whenever we play. The wasteful aspect of games opposes the fruitful and prolific life we should embrace. Each time a game with bloated mechanics or a high difficulty comes out, players don't hesitate to loudly claim how they don't want to waste their time playing it, because of their work and/or family life. For them, it's more fruitful to lower the difficulty and avoid convoluted mechanics than having to waste time on a game when they don't have much time to play it in the first place. While this argument is understandable, it doesn't hold in light of the fact that playing is, by default, a waste of time. If someone can only play an hour per day, for instance, it matters not if that time is spent fighting one boss again and again, or completing an entire level in another game. That hour, regardless of what's been done with it, has no impact on our daily life. Having a backlog and finishing games in order to complete a list amounts to nothing, given that no matter what, gaming is a waste. Players who claim that they don't want to waste time playing difficult games or facing unnecessary hindrances are trying to make gaming a more useful, fruitful endeavor. In other words, they are trying to make games something else, something less wasteful and more fulfilling. However, accepting games as a wasteful activity unshackles games from having to be justified. We play because we need a shelter from everything else, because humans cannot realistically just work and contribute to society. In the case we do, we become consumed by a public, productive life and forego anything private and intimate in the process. Think about it. Without a private, wasteful shelter our hobby provides us with, any time we spend playing is problematic, but also any time we hang out with our family or friends, since that time is wasted unless we spend it in a way that's productive, fruitful, meaningful. But what is a meaningful activity in the first place? Games are meaningful insofar as they are not meaningful, as they remain a meaningless endeavor. That way, there is nothing at stake when playing, nothing important is taking place, just enjoyment. We have nothing to lose, nothing to risk, so that playing can shelter us from the heavy weight of failing. More precisely, we can and do fail when playing, but there are no consequences to that, which is liberating. Without these aspects, games end up having to mean something, to be a tool we should use to our own benefit, because everything in our life should not be wasteful. That mindset results in reducing hobbies and relationships to transactions, whose value is to be useful to us and what we're trying to achieve. We can easily guess the consequences of thinking this way. Finally, if playing should remain useless and wasteful, it should also be free. By free, I mean that playing should not be obligatory. Since there is nothing at stake in playing, it doesn't matter if sometimes we play and sometimes we don't. There is no point in forcing ourselves to play games in order to go through our backlog, for example, given how gaming is a wasteful activity. We should play whenever we feel like it, whenever we can and are willing to do so. Forcing ourselves to play ends up transforming this occupation into a chore, into a necessary activity, and thus into a productive endeavor. There is nothing wrong with thinking about gaming as a distraction. Distractions exist as a separation from our daily life, and they only become problematic if they are no longer a bubble, but our entire life, no longer retaining that quality that made them a special place for us. To the question, do I want to play? The answer doesn't matter. Whether we want to or not, playing remains available as an activity removed from any sense of responsibility or significance. Embracing gaming as a free activity doesn't mean that it's not important to us. Rather, its value lies in its carefree quality. In a world where everything is monetized, optimized, evaluated, the shelter that games provide is nothing short of radical. In fact, there is comfort in the fact that games are available to us, and that they embody a radically separated activity with low stakes. There is something oddly beautiful in recognizing games as an activity that doesn't go anywhere. What it implies is that gaming has no destination, no end goal, and as such can only be about the journey. We play games like we wonder and wonder about the world, with no end in sight, only the pleasure of roaming around and the appreciation of a special time we give to ourselves. During that time, we search for a type of joy away from calculations, strategies, responsibilities, and so on. We don't always find it, and that's fine. I will be the first to admit that embracing games, the way I explain it in this video essay, is not easy to do, as we constantly try to justify our hobbies and the time we spend on them. That said, we have to keep trying to come to peace with the fact that games are not useful, that they make us lose time and energy, and that we do not gain anything of value from them. Each time we remind ourselves that games are useless, we open up yet another shelter in which we feel lighthearted, returning to a home where we can drop our heavy burden for a while, going nowhere but here and there. Thank you for having explored the uselessness of games with me. If you enjoyed this video, please show your support by subscribing and liking the video. I'll see you all in the next one.